So Hugh, welcome to the Lead.Learn.Grow podcast. Great to have you.
You know what, Robin, I am really honored. I think um, you and I talked about a little bit about me and how I got my career started. And the Sandler Institute was such a vital part of teaching me how I could move forward that when I had the opportunity to meet you, I just, what a treat. So thank you for
Well, likewise. I want to jump right in. I was telling you before we hit record, I said I had to stop doing research on Hugh because I kept coming up with so many things I wanted to talk about. And so we would end up with a 4-hour podcast.
that.
So let me jump in. I read where you had a quote from you, and it said the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one with yourself. I'd love for you to unpack that. When did that idea take root, and what meaning does that have for you?
Well, I'm a big conscious mind and unconscious mind person. So when I started, I understand neuroscience and what um, it really hit home probably this past year as much as anything when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I was really straight. You look at your wife and you're not where you want to be in life quite yet, and then you just kind of wonder if you're going to be leaving her behind. Um, I would tell everybody it was great, but Robin, what would happen is I would go to bed, and then I would just go through all this worry and doubt. So one of the things that I had written back years ago was the most important conversation is the conversation that you have with yourself. And then I realized, and this is in sales and just in life in general, that um, most people fail because of the conversation they're having with themselves. And as you know, being a coach and a leader and turned all these things around, what I really realized is that all those people that I had told that statement to, finally I had to start living it myself, and I did. And I did, and I turned it around. And I mean, there's a whole story that goes with that. But my entire life has been, um, I was diagnosed as an epileptic with epilepsy at the age of 10, and a time when they didn't know much about epilepsy. And I remember my mother when the doctor came in and told me that I had epilepsy. Had no idea what that was. In fact, I thought they said leprosy because I read that in the Bible somewhere. But when we got in the car, she said, she had a tear in her eye. And I said, Mom, it's going to be okay. And she said, I know it's going to be okay. It's not you that I'm really worried about. It's everybody else because they don't understand your disorder. And then she said something to me um, that I have built every business around. And and she said, Huey, it's important that you understand, never let anybody hold you back, especially yourself. Now, I
Hmm.
didn't realize back then what she was doing. I was like, oh, I wanted to go home and go play. But she did just an incredible favor for me because back in the day, I was playing all the sports and everything else. I was all medicated, over medicated, and you were figuring it all out. But she always um, made me realize, and my father, that um, never let anybody hold you back, especially yourself. So it created something inside of me, and she started putting underdog books, on my bed. So, and I love underdog books, and I love the ones, I love. Actually, I built my entire career about underdogs. In fact, this last one, I just saw the movie The Replacements, and I was like, that's the team that I built. It was a bunch of replacements, and then we went over and turned the industry around um, because they had heart. and I had heart. And so anyway,
Yeah.
it kind of started early on, but it really this past year when I went through stage 4 cancer and now I'm cancer free, I realized how important it was the conversation that I had with myself every morning. And if there's anything that I can say to people, it would be this. Most people get out of bed in the morning, really don't know what that day's going to look like. You happen to stub your toe, and now you're all upset. And for the rest of the day, you're upset. Um, so I'm big about gratitude. In fact, I got my gratitude rock right here, and I carry a gratitude rock in my uh, pocket. And when I start to go the other way, which we all do, I'll grab that rock and just start thinking about it, how grateful I am. And so that's part of having that conversation with myself.
So what's the conversation? So people hearing this, I know they're leaning in right now, but what's that conversation like? Like if we were eavesdropping, what would be some of the things we might hear, quote unquote, with you having the conversation with yourself?
Well, and you know what? We all have a couple of conversations, and I picked up things along the way as well. What's great about it is when I have a conversation now, and let's say, I'm part of the executive team, and we just got in a disagreement, which we did a little bit, and I always sometimes go back to that negative place, but then I realize, and I usually tell myself, this is probably one of the best things that ever happened to you. We're in this team together, and we're building it together. Um, and when I start having those conversations, instead of going to the negative, by the way, you cannot think negatively and positively at the same time. You either have to be one or another. Now, I get it, there's a little neutral there, but the bottom line is the one thing that I learned is that if you're going to go through joy and happiness, you can't do the other part. So, and it's a whole depression thing. Um, so that conversation would be, hey, what did you learn from this situation? Whether it's a salesperson that's out there the first time and they keep getting no, if you go back and you get all upset over, just say, hey, what could I have done differently? Who is it that maybe could have helped me? And guess what? If I'm getting a bunch of no's, well, maybe I should go to the person that's given me a no and say, hey, what could I do differently? How can you help me help myself? And so it's really about being positive. And but so many people aren't. When I sit here and I look at, you go from fear to anxiety, procrastination to depression to disease. And but the difference from that is knowledge. And so I'm all about knowledge. And I probably spend more money on Audible books and listening to those things. And just to put get my mind feeling the right way. But to say the conversation I have every morning is this: I love life. I love what it's going to bring me today, and I'm going to be a big part of that. And I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make it joyful. And I just love life, and I love it even more since this past year.
Yeah, well, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that. It reminds me of something I heard or read, but all of life is a story, right? It's all just a narrative. And to your point, it's a whole lot better if we tell ourselves a good story and we see ourselves in a winning story. And that's one of those. things that, like when I talk to clients about this kind of thing, it's like it's a little thing, and you might roll your eyes and you might poo-poo. It's like, oh, okay. But it's one of those things that it's funny when you talk to successful people that they're very different, but if you peel it back, there are some commonalities. And one of them is exactly what you've been describing. And another one is something that maybe we'll talk about now, and that is a journaling habit. So I heard you help, you said you had your gratitude journal, and uh, tell us about why that is a habit that is important to you.
Well, yeah, I think that it gives me an opportunity to really reflect
Mhm.
and reflect on myself. You know, it's funny. So many people go through life, um, or business or sales, um, and looking for whatever, whatever that golden parachute is that they're looking for. They keep striving it for it.
Mhm.
And journaling's really helped me, number one, to push myself to figure out where it is I want to go. But I also use journaling in a way that I can reflect backwards. So when I start to get hard on myself, which I do from time to time, I can take a look and journal and say, okay, what are those things that I did yesterday that really maybe I didn't do all 10 things, but what's that one, two, or three things that I did, and that helps. It also journaling also helps me because I can get out of my own way and start saying these are the things that I want, and this is what I'm gonna do about it. I
Mhm.
also love to draw and write. I mean, I'm quite a I'm a pretty good artist, um, but it just really calms me down, and it puts me in a position that I feel like that I'm really taking control of myself, and looking at all those other outside forces and things that are out there. You know, it helps me live from the heart.
How does gratitude how does gratitude fit into the business world? You think about that in terms of day-to-day building a business?
Yeah, it's funny, because gratitude's everything. It's where it's got to start, and it's I got to sit in. So the top 1% of salespeople, I've studied them my entire life, and I'm really in that category. But it all starts with a promise, and that promise starts with gratitude. So a lot of people that fail in sales are, the commission breath people. They want it all for themselves. But if we go in there and we start off with some type of gratitude and make that person feel better, then you can go in and then you can educate. But then the ease of doing business is the next thing. What's crazy about it with gratitude is that, they're going to remember, they remember when they walk out of the that offer, or you walk out of that office, they're only going to remember 7% of what you tried to teach them. They're going to remember, you know the gratitude, how you came across, because people buy how they feel. But that's just not in sales, that's just with people. And then becoming, ease of doing business, that's really big. But the other part is your belief systems, and create, don't compete, exceed expectations, and always give forward. But it all starts with gratitude. I see, Robin, it's really sad because we've got so many people that want to go into sales, and most of them are really nice people, and they're
Mhm.
trying to figure it out. Um, but they don't realize that, gratitude starts with making it about the other person.
That's right. That's right. I mean, in a lot of ways, sales, well, maybe not, maybe more than in a lot of ways. Maybe it is. Sales is one of those things that it it can only be about the person on the other side. If you're going to make it in sales to the degree that you can take your eyes off yourself and put them on other people, I think about the very best salespeople I've ever known and trained and coached, and without fail, they would never sell someone something that they didn't need.
Oh, yeah.
They would never think about themselves. It was truly about, are the solutions that we offer a good fit for what you're doing and your budget and your timeline and all of that? And if the answer to that is no, they're okay with that. And it's the exact opposite picture. Like you think about the great salesperson and they're the closer and they're the hard chart. A lot of great salespeople are not like that. They're empathetic, they're gentle, and they truly make it about the other person. And that sounds almost cliche, but not many
It,
do it that way.
Robin, it's crazy. I've been the number one wherever I went. I was at that type level. And my wife used to always tell me, she said, people just don't get you. Now, my clients did, but most people didn't know how I did it.
Yeah,
And it's because I cared. And I really cared about the person on the other side. And I'd be more than willing to walk away, but not only walk away, but if I didn't have the solution, if I had an idea of where they could go to get the solution, I'd pick up the phone and call on their behalf.
yeah,
I can't tell you how many times I did that a year or two later, I was doing business with them. And then I built sales teams around that. And there's a big difference between a transactional type salesperson, a lone wolf type salesperson, and somebody that's transformational, that does it from the heart.
yeah. I call it sort of the difference between the friendly peddler and the advisor. And when we show up, like you said, you made me chuckle, but when we show up with commission breath, we're like the old Mr. Haney from Green Acres. We've got something. Do you want to buy something? Everything I got is great. What can I quote for you? Anything I can um, put in front of you. And unfortunately, when salespeople are sort of left to their own without any coaching, without any development, that's kind of what it turns into. And I love what you said, even going the extra mile of helping them find someone they can buy from. Those are deposits that will benefit you and your customer for forever.
It's funny because I was very fortunate. I won Person of the Year for my industry last year, which pretty big deal, and was not on my bucket list. It was because of that. It's because of the amount of people that I had helped along the way, and a
Yeah.
lot of times never did business with them, but just had tremendous amount of respect, and it just came back to me. So um, what was really fun about this was that I was the ninth grade kid that was supposed to go to special needs. I it's an amazing story. Um, but I made a decision that I really wanted to help people that were stuck, and help them with how I had learned to become um, unstuck by finding what was important to me on the inside and living from the inside out. I was able to do that, and um, I think I told you last night I watched the movie The Replacements. Well, this past we took this company, and it was a New Jersey, New York company. They looked at the world very differently, but they gave me the opportunity to go build the rest of the world out outside of New Jersey and New York. So it's very transactional on their part, very transformational on my part. But I went and I was hiring people off lawnmowers, out of prison. I mean, none of them, not all of them were that extreme, but everybody was stuck
Yeah.
to a degree and they were looking for something different.
Yeah.
And you know, today our company's been bought and we've got an HR person there and they look at it. You got to check all the boxes. Well, the only box I check is if I had a gut that you want it more and you proved to me that you could, I'll take you through my 7-step process and we're going to do this as a team.
Yeah.
And I was able to teach people, salespeople can be taught. I mean, I love what you guys are doing over at Sandler
Mhm.
because you, the largest percentage of kids coming out of college never read another book. And that's when I started reading. And when I found Sandler, my story is pretty unique one.
Yeah. Tell this story. This is a great story. I want to hear this again.
I was living in Roanoke, Virginia. I'd worked for Ferguson Enterprises, didn't do so well there. I ended up becoming a rep in Roanoke, Virginia. Um, I don't think I told you this part. So I was dating my wife, at the time, and she had only worked half a year, and I was working for a manufacturer's rep, getting paid on a 1099. And I got my 1099, she got hers, and she made twice the amount of money I made. I'd been there for a year and I was thinking I was this great sales guy. I'm like, man, this has got to, I don't think she's going to stick around if I keep this up. So I ended up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I got recruited by a competitor, sent me to Baltimore. They sent me out of Virginia. They didn't want me there anymore. So, but I was working as hard as I could. I couldn't afford where I was, so I ended up getting a janitor's closet for half the price. And I'll never forget one night the pizza man came up and I went to go grab my wallet and I had no money. I didn't have a credit card, and it was like, man, something's got to change. So I sit on the couch and I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? Somebody told me this thing about Sandler, and I'm going to give him a call tomorrow. Give those people a call tomorrow. And they were in Pikesville or someplace over there in
Mhm.
Baltimore. Anyway, right outside of Baltimore. So it was right when Sandler was kind of getting started, and I
Mhm.
think it was his second group. Went in there, sat around this table. There was a bunch of salespeople in there, and I was just eating it up. They called me into the office afterwards and they said, okay, what'd you think? I said, yeah, I got to have this. And they said, well, this is how much it's going to cost. I said, I got up and I looked at them and I said, you don't understand. I couldn't buy pizza last night. I couldn't afford pizza. And they said, you couldn't afford the pizza. And so I go to walk out and I stopped and I looked at them. I said, tell you what, I got a deal for you. What if I go out and get you 2 clients and I bring them in? Will you give me 6 months worth of training? And they looked at me and they said, yeah, go ahead. Well, anyway, I went out in 2 weeks. I had them 2 clients. The client that they have now, one of them that I brought in was when I went to the Camden Yards this past year. They were on the outfield wall. So I probably brought them in one of the largest clients they've ever had. And but that 6 months was so amazing
Yeah.
because it was they had 2 books. Larry Wilson, who was an old time sales guy, was about consultative selling,
Yeah.
and then you know Earl Nightingale, Lead the Field.
Yeah.
And I was like, how could you gotten any better than that? Those 2 people, and I still have the tapes over here. My wife laughs because she remembers me taking those and putting the tapes in. All right, salespeople, any salesperson that's out there, it's too easy to get on Audible and not listen to what the stuff is you need to do. And with Lead the Field, it was all about confidence and attitude. And with Larry Wilson, I just did his system on Fridays, but I became a consultant to the industry. And the next thing I knew after that it was so neat because um, I took another job, and it was calling on Ferguson and some of the others, and they had zero market penetration. In one year, I took them from zero to $4 million, which back in those days that was a big deal. And I became the consultant to the industry at like an age of 25 or 26.
That's
And all the
great.
50-year-olders were running around and say, what, behind me and saying, hey, whatever Hornsby will give you, I'll give you an extra five. And but I wasn't selling on the extra five. What I had done is I'd figured out what was important to the client, um, which was turns of inventory, not dropping the marketplace. And so I found aligned myself with the group of partners, and my sales career just took off. And Sandler was a huge part of that.
Well, it's such a great story in the sense that, sales is a lot of things. And I like what you said earlier because almost every problem that, at least I see, if you peel it back enough, it comes down to beliefs. Beliefs are at the core of just about everything. But or maybe, there's your story illustrates the idea that sales is also something you can learn. You're not coming out of the womb like, oh, here's a great salesperson, mom saying, oh, I can't wait till Hugh grows up to make cold calls. You went from not being able to pay for pizza as a young adult to being a consultant to the industry before you turned 30 and person of the year in the industry last year. And I hope people are listening to this because the thread is here's somebody who took their craft very seriously and they worked on their mindset, they worked on their techniques and their skills and the way they thought about it. And I guess it was unusual then and it's unusual today. And
And
I,
and
oh,
and it's a shame because I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 4:30, depending what time the dog comes knocking on my door to eat. And I do my Peloton, I throw my earbuds in, and I'm constantly learning and trying to improve.
yeah,
Um, I'm constantly trying to find that secret sauce for people, and it's because I love it, and I love improving, and but I don't really understand why so many people, um, if you don't love what you do, sales is not, and I'm not saying that you start out loving it because I sell plumbing supplies. That was not on my agenda to sell plumbing supplies. But you know what I do is I help people. And now I understand the business so well, I can really help them. And but I help them because I'm constantly upgrading my skills, and I'm constantly putting myself around the right people, such as yourself, Robin. Um, and because I don't want to be around those other people. And for those sales leaders out there, the one thing I had to learn is you can't fix everybody, and you can't coach desire. Now,
mhm,
there's a lot of people out there that maybe they've lost their desire, and I'll give them a second or a third chance, but they have to show me that they want to invest in themselves. So, um,
yeah. No, I want to talk to you about. I read something you wrote, and you were talking about, and you've alluded to it, but I want to get into this a little bit. Four types of people. So we have, one category is failure, unwilling to grow. Another is traditional. It's the way it's always been. I accept it. Frustrated. I want to change, but don't know how. And then transformational, embracing growth. So I think a lot of folks that we encounter, and I think everybody can say this has applied to them at some point in their life and maybe multiple times, but sometimes we do get stuck. We do get stuck, and maybe we know there's another level and we just can't quite figure out how to get there, or maybe we're just like this is as good as it's going to be, but people do get stuck. So if you're talking to, when you're talking to people that you assess that, you know what, this person's just kind of beating their head against the wall, they've got some desire. What are some, not really a prescription, I'm not big on prescriptions, but what would be some things that you would tell someone who feels stuck to help them begin to get on the path of growth, if that even makes sense?
I'd probably tell them to go and sit down and write down, like 20 of their wants, something that they wanted along the way that they haven't even thought about, in a long time. And I'd tell them to go ahead and write those down. Um, and if you could stop at 20, fine. If you go to 25, but then go back and look at it the next day and write it again and then write it again. And what happens a lot of times is as you continue to write it down, you start to find the priorities, the ones that are most important that start to show up at the top and really start to think about it. Um, One of the things that I teach and coach and have been through myself because I went through trauma when I was a child, was that um, I usually talk to people and I'll ask them, I say, what is it that's holding you back? And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people do know and they don't want to share it. And then I'll tell them to go. I said, you know what? Then the biggest thing you can do, and my mentor taught me this a long time ago, was to forgive. Forgive whoever that person is, whoever it is that thinks that damaged you, and then you come back out and you look yourself in the mirror, and the most important thing you do is to forgive yourself.
Hmm.
When we talked about how we started this, is the most important conversation is the conversation that we have with ourselves. There's too many people out there today that are having conversations with themselves that are living in the past for some reason and not changing the conversations that they should be having with themselves, that they have incredible value. When I was able to forgive, and I'm not saying it happened overnight because I was abused at a younger age, um, but it took time. But when I started to forgive, when I forgave him, and I realized that's what I was dealing with, and then then when I started to really forgive myself, it really changed my life. Now I was a good person beforehand, but after I was able to do that, I I became pretty powerful. And so some of those people, who knows where it came from? In some of my cases, alcoholic parents or somebody that said something to you, or it could be whatever. But trying to figure that out, if there's something that's holding you back, it's a lot more than just, there's something going on and you need to get out, get it out.
Well, and I think that your comments earlier about gratitude play right into that. Like it's really hard to beat yourself up for all these things that happened in the past if you're intentional about being grateful and mindful of the right now. I remember John Wooden, the old coach, said, every day he'd always start his day with, he called it his thank yous. And
Yeah.
so, thanks for this and thanks for my wife and thanks for my, go down the list. And he said, it's nearly impossible to have a bad day if you start your day with gratitude. And
And I'll give you something else that makes it. So I send out gratitude rocks. I send out a lot of notes. When I was person of the year, I'll send out a magazine. I sent a magazine to every person I ever worked for whether they fired me or not, which I did get fired a few times, and just said it, I wouldn't be here without you. And
That's
I
all.
want to say thank you. And you'd be surprised how many people that reached out to me. The first job I ever had out of college, I got fired, and it was hadn't talked to that guy in forever. Sent him a magazine, a gratitude rock, and said, "Hey, if it wouldn't have been for you, Jack, I wouldn't be here today."
That's
And I want to
fantastic.
say that because I think when I take a look at my life today, and if it would have been any different, if I wouldn't have gone through what I went through at an early age, um, I love where I am. And a lot of people need to look at that as well. If they feel like they're not quite where they want to be, but you got a loving family and you got everything else at home and whatever else, just remember, life creates life, and being able to say that sometimes it's those tragedies and those really hard times we go through that get us to where we are today.
Yeah, love that. You said something. I was reaching in my desk here. So let's see. This is so here's a journal written by a crazed maniac. I'd been in business 3 months, just started my business. This was during the dry heaves stage. And a mentor told me, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down 101 goals and don't put any restrictions on it. Just be, just things that you want to do, things you want to accomplish, things that you want to happen, experiences, all this stuff. And it's amazing. I forgot about this book and I guess it's been about a year ago, I was doing a talk at a Sandler conference, Sandler client conference. And I was reminded of this, and I brought this out on stage. And it's amazing how many of these 101 goals I can cross off. When I wrote this, my my daughter was in early days of college. My kid was a ninth grader in high school. So grandkids were a long way away. And one of the things I wrote down was take my grandkids to Disney World. And during that, the talk was in Orlando, and sure enough, our daughter and her husband and her grandkids were with us, and we spent 3 days in Disney World. And you think, well, okay, that but I just don't think that stuff you talked about. I don't know if we were recording yet or not, but you talked about reticular activation. And it's
Yeah,
like when we set our mind on something and we get an image and a picture, it's like, things conspire to help us achieve that. And I just think
it's
it's a
the
powerful
whole
thing.
the whole thing is nuts. So, my story is I was in Richmond, Virginia. I had just gotten fired from Watts because, they called it a downsizing. Um, I was like their top sales guy, and I think they were paying me too much. And so they fired me, and I remember going out on my patio, and I remember everything about it because I couldn't believe it happened. And and I remember talking to my wife and the kids, and I'm trying not to, I'm trying to be Mr. Strongman, but I wasn't. And I went back out on my patio and I started writing. Today I write the I ams,
Yeah.
um, because that's you're talking like it's already happened. Well, back then I did the I wills.
Mhm.
The amazing thing is I started writing all these things that I want, and today I'm looking out on the Chesapeake Bay as we talk right here on the left with a 275-foot pier, a boat, um, all those things that I didn't even know that were possible. And I didn't even have a job at the time, but I just kept writing them and it became a part of me. And listen, that was not, I mean, having a nice house and everything else, that was, that's nice. but more than anything else, it was about the things that I wanted to do with the family. But I crossed every one of those. I've got those sitting in the back, and I crossed every one of those out. The only thing that's happened since then is my income. Uh, I say I wanted to make this much money, and I'm telling you, they I'm making four times that now.
Yeah, it's funny. Like and I look back at some of my old journals and it's like the thing that I couldn't believe. Like I couldn't write the number with a straight face. Now it would be like a panic situation. It's crazy. It really is crazy. It gives me chills hearing you tell these stories because, you
Well,
know,
wealth is an amazing thing, and it really not all about the money, but it is about the wealth, because wealth gives us an opportunity. This is what great about sales. It gives us an opportunity to do the things that we want to do and
that's
give
right.
back to the people that we want to give back to.
That's right. That's right. And if you're a young salesperson listening to this, and if you're one of my clients, you've already heard me wag my finger at you. But one of the things that I think is really cool about sales is if you like, so it's your craft. And if you do some of the things like Hugh's been talking about here today, and you truly make it your life's mission to get really good at this, be a 1% person, you can actually erase a lot of mistakes. You can overcome a lot of opportunities that maybe you didn't have, and you can live in the same neighborhoods as doctors and lawyers. And I think that is such a it's like sales, not to get biblical, but sales is no respecter of persons.
Well,
And
I very much believe in the biblical side of it, because I study that, and um, I study, everything we do, um, you know, you know, no matter what you believe in, but but if you look at the Bible and in the passages and everything that have gone along with it, leadership is a big part of that. So
yeah,
I'm a part of that John Maxwell group, um, and leadership is part of that. But
yeah.
um,
No,
it's
I'm sorry.
yeah, no, that's fine.
Um, I got two more things we have to get to. But we need to get to them. All right, so I want to ask you about kind of goes along with what we've been talking about, but tell me about your involvement, your work with the Napoleon Hill Foundation, because a lot of people have heard of Napoleon Hill. I suspect, wrote um, Think and Grow Rich and other books. What I didn't know is he is from our fair Commonwealth. I didn't know that until just a few years ago. Happened to be,
Yeah,
I feel like I was driving by and I saw a sign or something. Where is it? Was it Wise or?
yeah, it's in Wise, Virginia, but
Yeah.
I can tell you, it's not anywhere close. So, I'll tell you a little bit of story. So, I had my number two guy that was going to replace me, because I'm always trying to hire my replacement, and he died unexpectedly, and the company was changing. They realized that the stuff that I had built outside the company had become about me, which was never intended to do that. So, but he died unexpectedly, and I was in a really bad place for a lot of times, and I had this vision, and my mom was there, and you know Jesus showed up, and they knew I was just in a bad spot. My mother said, "Hey, listen, you need to let go of this. This world needs you." And the next day, I got a phone call. I had written an article, and I'd gotten a phone call from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, Don Green, who is the executive director over there. Um, And we had this conversation, and it was like I was talking to my dad, who'd been, you know, passed away for quite some time. Anyway, Don read my article and had read my article, and he said, "Hey, you remind me of Napoleon Hill, what he went through." And I was like, "Well, I don't think that I don't know about that, but gosh, that's quite a compliment." Well, he invited me to come visit, and it couldn't have happened at a better time. And you know, I'm very faithful, and so I set it up, and Don is, you know, he's in charge of that entire foundation. I've read books about him and everything else. And I went there and I spent the day with him.
Hmm.
And he took me around to the Napoleon Hill house. He took me to his house. And I mean, it was poverty back then. And then we were sitting down having lunch, and you know, he's 82 years old, and I'm just sitting there saying, how did I end up here? And you know, to me it was all faith. And I told him that story about the vision that I had and everything else. And he said, you know, Hugh, um, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go home, and I want you to really dig deep. And that was it. And I mean, we talked, you know, we jumped in the
Yeah.
car and we went back, but that's what he told me. He said, I really want you to go dig deep within inside you, because there's something else going on that you really need to find out about. Now, since then, you know, we've become friends, and I would, you know, I haven't talked to him as much as I used to, but I used to text him about once a month, and we'd call, and we'd have a conversation, because I don't know, there was just something there. But the Napoleon Hill Foundation, I realized at that time that I wanted to go into business for myself. And so he connected me with the uppers of the foundation, and there was something that just didn't mesh. And so I ended up um, going to my company, and but I studied Napoleon Hill, and I studied Bob Proctor, and I studied, you know, I studied all these people on how they'd gone about things, and it was all through the heart, you know. But what it really helped me do um, was just get closer to myself. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine where I'm going to be in a year, but the it was about beliefs, um, and it was about living from the inside out and understanding, you know, where we are. So the Napoleon Hill Foundation is, they write all those books, and you know, they're the real deal. But Don and I are good friends today.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's really interesting. All right, we're going to go out, and I'm going to say we've had conversations, and this one, so you get to know, I'm starting to get to know Hugh and what he's about. Hugh, I got to tell you, this one surprised me. This one was a curveball, and then you said, "Well, go look this thing up," and I went to look it up, and there it is on YouTube. Hugh Hornsby doing stand-up comedy in New York City. What in the world?
You know what? I can't even. You know, when you reflect back, when I reflect back on this past year, it's pretty amazing. So, um, yeah, and I was going through a hard time. You know, the company was changing. I'd given them a certain amount of time, you know, that I was going to leave, and go do my own thing, and then I got cancer. You know, and so, you know, I went through all that, and you know, went to the National Speakers Association, the whole thing. But the bottom line is that in 1 year, I probably went through what most people went through in a lifetime. Um, but what I realized is that um, I was just so fortunate, and that, you know, I was going to make it through there. So I went through 28 sessions. Turns out they misdiagnosed me. So I lived with stage 4 cancer for a year. And when my doctor told me I had stage 2 cancer, we were high-fiving in his office. and it was just a misdiagnosis by a doctor and everything else. Well, went through 28 sessions of radiation. Next thing I know, there was a keynote in our there was a um, something in Philadelphia. They invited me up there, and I'm in the audience, and they pull me up on stage, and they said, "Hey, you want you to be vulnerable." Well, it happened to be that day I had just started traveling, and went through prostate cancer, so things weren't going so well. And my wife walks in, and I've packed 12 things of underwear for a day and a half trip, and she looks at me, "Have you lost your mind?" And I was like, "Honey, it's just, just went through all this. I just want to be safe." Well, anyway, I went up on stage, and it was almost hilarious. And it was called the ROI of LOL. And the comedian that was there reached out to me the next day and said, "We want you to come to New York City to do comedy." Me, I'm saying, "Okay, when do you want me to be there?" Like, "I'll be there
Of
next
course.
week." Like, I'd never done comedy in my life. Well, fortunately, it was about a month. And, I practiced it, and I went up and did comedy. But the great stories were when I walked in, sat down next to my wife, and I said, "Babes, guess what? I'm going to do comedy in New York City at the West Side Comedy Club." And she looked at me and she said, "Hugh, do you know that you're not funny?" And I'm like, "Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that." And so I said, "You watch." And she said, "Why would you want to do that?" I said, "Because it's about I'm going to do it on cancer. It's
Yeah.
about the cause."
Yeah.
And I worked on it and worked on it. And I remember when it was coming up to the time, and I put something on. If you go on YouTube, if you go on Facebook, you can see when at one time I was promoting myself. And it's got this song on there. It's the underdog song. And I was like, "Oh, that's me." And so I show it to her. She said, "Well, the song's really good. And but why on earth would you go and put that out before you go on stage and find out if you're any good?" And I'm like, "Because, honey, this is about the cause." I said, "This is about cancer. There's a lot of people that have gone through cancer, and this is about the cause." And she says, "Hugh, why does everything have to be about a cause with you?" So anyway, she wouldn't come to New York City with me. Thank gosh she didn't, because I practiced forever. But yeah, I pulled it off. And
Well, well, if you're listening to this, that YouTube link's going to be in the show notes. And so you can decide for yourself if Hugh is funny. See if his wife is right, or I would say I think it was good. It was good. I mean, don't quit your day job, right? Don't quit your day job, but it was good. I think about,
they invited me back. And
well, there you go.
and then actually I looks like I might be doing comedy over here in Newport News um, pretty soon.
Really?
Yeah, somebody had seen it, and so we're going to see. Maybe we're trying to. My agent, who gets 10% of everything I get paid, which was zero,
Yeah.
is trying to work it out. So
Let me know. Let me
yeah,
know. That is I mean, that's daunting to go up and just, you're in the capital of comedy and just, okay, lights on and go. And oh, by the way, be funny. That's tough.
yeah, it was quite an experience, and
Uh,
really, I'll be honest with you, it probably changed me as much as anything.
really, how
Um,
so?
Well, when I was young, I went through trauma with a teenage kid that did things to me that he should have never done, and I carried that for over 60 years. And
Mm,
so when I went through this whole cancer thing, um, that was part of what I felt like was really holding me back. So I got in the truck one day, went to the place that he had done everything. I went on my knees and I forgave him, and I came back and I forgave myself. Now that wasn't the first time I'd done it, but it's the first time I'd done it in that that way. But when I went on stage that night, uh, Randy was on my shoulder, and I'm sitting there in the green room, and they come in and say, "Hugh Hornsby, you're up," and I'm like, it's like in my mind, he tapped me and he said, "We got this," and I said, "No, I know we do." And when I started it, you can see me kind of, you know, slow down at first, and then I took off. But that was probably the one of the biggest things, because I was able to really let it out. Now Randy goes with me everywhere I go, and I look at him and say, "Hey, we got this, don't we?" So
That's great.
that's I want to end it with the forgiveness part of it, because that was huge for me. And the other thing is that salespeople out there, you see people that are successful, you see Robin, you see all these people. The bottom line is that everybody's gone through hard times. There's all these people that are at the top right now. That's because they failed and they got back up and went a different way and everything else. I love sales and I love people. I'm a people-based business person, but the bottom line is that don't stop. If this is something that you want, just keep putting that foot in front of the other, and then look for people that can help you with it. So
Uh,
that's the probably biggest thing that I could say, is that you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes.
yeah,
And the last thing I want to say is this: Zig Ziglar used to say, "You help enough people get what they want, and they'll help you get what you want."
yeah. It's a good way to end it. Where can people, Hugh, if people want to connect with you, if they want to find you, um, you're on LinkedIn. What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so go on LinkedIn, and but send me a message from there is a good way. The
Okay,
other one is that Hugh.H@everflowsupplies.com. Uh,
okay,
reach out to me and just say, "Hey, like to have a conversation with you." I'm open to having conversations with people. Um, but I want to help people that want to help themselves. Um, yeah, so that's a
yep,
great way. Or um, just reach
yep,
out, or can reach through you, and you know how to get a hold of me from with the phone. Um,
yep,
and I coach, I mentor, and find a coach, find a mentor.
yep,
Um, whether you have the money to pay for it, I don't know if Robin's going to give you the deal that those guys gave me, but the bottom line is that what I have found is that if if you're gonna if you're gonna succeed in life, you have to be willing to invest in yourself. Now, where you
yeah,
come up with that money, I don't know, but everybody that I've put through programs, I've made sure that they had skin in the game. So ask yourself, are you willing to invest? And if you don't have the money, maybe you can go out and get a couple clients, right, Robin?
yeah. I mean, I'm open to the conversation. Never thought about that, but that's my new on my pricing tier. That's my new tier. It's called the Hugh Hornsby model. And it's
That's
like
right.
bring me two clients. One of them needs to be, uh, my future biggest client, and then we'll let you in the door. But no, Hugh, thank you. I can't thank you enough for sharing what you shared. It's obvious, you know, talking to you for 30 seconds, you give you're vulnerable, you've been successful, and it's been hard earned, and it's been intentional, and so many takeaways and so many lessons learned. So sincerely, thank you for taking your time and sharing with me and with the folks who hear this. I really appreciate it.
Well, and I'll make you an offer. First of all, you and I just met, and I feel like I've known you forever. But I'd love to make you an offer. If I can ever come in and speak to your group or help you in any way, I'd be more than glad. to do that. I
Well,
believe in what we're doing here. I believe in what you're doing. I want to help you in your business. So I'm willing to pay it forward, if that's something that you ever have, or if you have somebody that just needs to have a conversation with somebody. I don't charge for coaching. I don't do that. But I do, I am very passionate about helping people. And if I can help you, I do keynotes. I'm getting ready to do a keynote, or actually a workshop with 180 people in
mhm,
Las Vegas, for Hardy, Heating, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration
mhm.
Distribution Institute. But anytime we can get the word out about, making this world a little bit better, and making people look at sales from a different perspective, I'm all over it.
Love it. I love it. Thank you, Hugh. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great.